John Fitzgerald Kennedy was born on May 29, 1917, in Brookline, Massachusetts, into a wealthy Irish Catholic family. He attended a Catholic boys' boarding school in Connecticut and graduated from Harvard University in 1940.
Shortly after, JFK joined the U.S. Navy. In 1943, his ship was split in two by a Japanese warship. Kennedy led the survivors to an island where they were rescued 6 days later. The incident earned him the Navy and Marine Corps Medal for extreme heroic conduct, and the Purple Heart for injuries he suffered. After the war, he worked briefly as a reporter.
In 1946, he won a seat in Boston for the U.S. House of Representatives, and in 1952 was elected for the U.S. Senate. On September 12, 1953, he married Jacqueline Lee Bouvier. The two had 3 children, Caroline, John, and Patrick.
In 1956, he was nearly chosen to be the vice presidential candidate for Adlai Stevenson. This raised his profile, and in 1960, he was chosen to be the Democratic nomination for the presidency. He went up against Republican nominee Richard Nixon, and at 43 years old, Kennedy won the election, making him the 35th and youngest president of the United States. It was a very tight election, with Kennedy receiving only 0.17% more votes than Nixon nationwide. During the election, when the debates were broadcasted on television, it seemed as if Kennedy was winning the debates, but the radio broadcast made it seem like Nixon was winning. This is due to the fact that Kennedy looked more relaxed and professional on camera.
This was the first time a Roman Catholic had been elected president, and it was a big issue in America where many Protestants distrusted the prospect of America being influenced by the Vatican. During his inauguration, JFK gave a very memorable speech where he encouraged citizens to help the nation become strong again. He said, "Ask not what your country can do for you, ask what you can do for your country."
In 1961, he adopted a plan for Cuban exiles to invade their homeland and try to overthrow Castro and establish a non-communist government. 1,400 exiles landed at Cuba's Bay of Pigs on April 17th. The mission was a complete failure, and the entire force was either killed or captured. Kennedy took full responsibility for the failure of the operation.
In the summer of 1962, Soviet leader Khrushchev reached a secret agreement with the Cuban government to supply nuclear missiles capable of reaching the U.S. Kennedy responded by placing a naval blockade around Cuba and demanding the removal of the missiles and the destruction of the sites. Khrushchev agreed to remove the missiles if the U.S. pledged to not re-invade Cuba. The incident led to a major escalation of the nuclear arms race.
Kennedy's desire to stop the spread of communism led him to increase U.S. involvement in the conflict in Vietnam. Although he did not want to fight the war for them, he wanted to support the South Vietnamese by sending equipment and advisors.
By the fall of 1963, political advisors were preparing for the next presidential campaign, and it was evident that Kennedy was going to run and attempt to be reelected. But on November 22, 1963, President Kennedy was shot twice by Lee Harvey Oswald while traveling in a motorcade to Dallas with his wife. Later that day, Kennedy was pronounced dead shortly after arriving at a nearby hospital. JFK is still one of the most influential Americans to this day.